Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru. Welcome to this very special episode of Awake Minute by Minute. Today we have two guests with us, Walter and Donna. Welcome both. Very pleased to have you. And of course, we have Mike and Priyank. But Walter or Donna, I would go into some detail to introduce yourselves, but please, I would have you do the honors. Maybe, Walter, do you want to kick us off? Could you introduce yourself to ourselves and the listeners?
Sure. I'm Walter Cruttenden. I've been a devotee for 50 years or so, and wrote the book Lost Star of Myth and Time, and created the film The Great Year, which I guess we'll be talking a little bit about today. In my day job, I do a little bit of fintech and investing, but primarily focused on just creating a better world, however that is. I'm involved in a lot of different enterprises.
Lovely. And Donna.
Hi, I'm Donna. I'm working with Walter on developing a movie for the book Lost Star of Myth and Time. And I'm a painter as well.
Yeah.
A background in finance.
Epic. What do you paint, Donna?
Everything has a Scottish theme, pretty much.
Yeah. It's like the big hairy cows, is it? With the
well, there are certainly some
Highlander.
sheep involved.
Actually, she's an amazing painter, and she has a style where she picks some icon like a sheep or something like that, and she does it over and over and over again in these patterns. And she's getting quite the name, Donna is. And so you should see her work someday.
Well, do you have a website, Donna? Do you have anything that you can share with us?
I do. It's donnanairi.com is my website. But this isn't about that.
No, just great to jump on that after, because I'm going to be buying a house, and I'll want to put some pictures up, so who knows. But thanks for the short intros, guys. Really, what connects us all is Guruji. First and foremost, I would suggest being devotees of the SRF and Guruji's work. Just a short, moment here to pause and reflect about Guruji and when you came into the SRF. Walter, when was it you first? Or how did you first come across Yogananda and his teachings?
Someone, I had my spiritual experiences when I was a kid, like probably everybody did. And so I was searching, and someone happened to give me AY when I was 17 years old. And I read it that year and started practicing a little bit, and then just kept reading it every year. And, the book changes as your consciousness changes. So it's quite amazing. And I recently read the Steve Jobs autobiography and was pleasantly surprised to learn that he too read it every year. And I don't know, there's just something about it, this whole work that pulls you in. And that book seems to be Master's emissary to bring us so many on board.
Mm-hmm. And Donna, as we were talking before we started recording, Scottish. You've been in New York. You're now West Coast in LA. Where did you first come across Yogananda's teachings?
Well, I started going to the temple in New York, which just so happened to be a few blocks away from where I lived, and I was reading Autobiography of a Yogi at the same time, and started to meet more and more devotees, and they just happened to be the most interesting people that I'd ever met in my life, actually. I think meditation has a profound impact on people, and have just gone deeper and deeper and deeper into the practice and into Yogananda's teachings as well, and have become very involved. SRF's become very important to me. I think I read Autobiography of a Yogi a few years ago, about 3 years ago. I think I met the only Scottish devotees as well. I think there's only two of us. one in Scotland.
So one in Scotland. We actually had one of the devotees on the podcast, didn't we? Several episodes ago. Stuart, yeah, great guy. Yeah, Glasgow, right?
Yes.
So yeah,
It's
growing. It's growing in Scotland. Good to hear. So the previous minute that we were on, I think it was episode number 27, if I'm right, 25, minute 25. And in that minute on the Awake documentary, which maybe you guys can share a little reflections on that if you've watched it, and you know what your thoughts of it were. But we were looking at Sri Yukteswar, which brings us into some of his teachings. And of course, as you guys well know, he wrote the book, The Holy Science, which has a very interesting topic in there, which we're going to discuss today on the Yugas. But first, just before we jump into the Yugas and so on, you have watched the documentary Awake, Walter?
Yes,
more than once.
Yeah, you know, I saw it when they were just putting together the you know, sort of the early, before they published it, because I'd worked with Peter. He was my cabin mate at you know, the How to Live camp up in the mountains there in Southern California. And yeah, I remember them filming it, and of course he told me all about it. So I saw that early version, and then I think I saw the completed version since then. But it's been some years, yeah. But very, very beautifully done, and obviously it's impacted the lives of many, many people.
And Donna, is this something you've watched as well, I presume?
I did watch it once a couple of years ago now. I thought it was very impactful, very, very beautiful. And the work that you're doing to help promote it is honorable.
Well, we've been very fortunate to have some of the key people on the documentary on the show, and their insights have been great, just with the production and the work that they've contributed to as well. So it's lovely to get these insights. And you mentioned, you know, Walter, your job, your day job, really in fintech, is something that clearly you continue to do. But on the side, I suppose you have other interests, and that's really what we're here to talk about today. I have a question though. You know, your background, really, for anybody who doesn't know, is a successful businessman, as you say, in fintech. If you Google your name, you see a lovely picture of you and your son, where a short bio says that you started a company with your son doing like micro lending, or not lending, apologies, micro investing.
Yeah, that one's called Acorns, which is, you connect your cards. It's a little app, and it rounds up your purchases, and so you're investing every day. And you know, the power of compounding goes to work from little acorns, mighty oaks to grow. Yeah,
it's beautiful, and it's
now
it's a real
5 million people on the platform, net and over 5 billion in assets. So it's really worked well.
Yeah, epic. Yeah, it's a great lesson for anybody to use the power of compounding, and it's great to tap into that for individuals' wealth around the world. So yeah, so great to see that. But really, I have a question, and that is, where do you find the time to do the other interests that you have, which is looking at the Yugas, the work with the Great Year, and writing the books, and looking to do more work in the Lost Star. Where do you find the time to do these things, and how do you prioritize these things over your day job, as you say?
Yeah, you know, I think whatever we're truly interested in, you find time. You just because it's fun and interesting. It's not a job really for me, and yeah, no, you know, I remember when I first read Sri Yukteswar's Holy Science, and there was that little tiny thing in the introduction where he had to basically explain the yugas quickly, because the book is really about something bigger, the enlightenment process, if you will. And he said, this might be hard to understand because we're in a really low yuga right now, and we're in a low yuga because, and then he gets into the whole how the solar system works. And that I'd always been interested in astronomy, and just the light bulb went off. And so yeah, ever since then, I've just been studying that topic and then writing articles about it or doing radio shows about it, and of course doing the books and then the documentary. And so it's not work, it's just stuff I do, in my spare time.
And for anybody
when we were, Walter, when we were deciding on this, or thinking that because yugas kept coming up in various aspects of our conversations in the previous podcasts, and we thought, okay, we must do a special episode on yugas because people had asked for it as well. And naturally, yugas and you seem to have a very strong expertise in the area, I should say, because we were looking for someone perfect, and you seem to fit the bill. But personally, for I'll tell you why. Part of the reason why it's come up, because I think you just touched on it there, and in the introduction he says, in the Hindu scholars since for the last 3,000 years have got the scale wrong, the scale of the yugas, and they've done some pretty much mental arithmetic. They've done some miscalculations, as it were. And how that has come up with me personally in my life is people sometimes use the scripture in a very dogmatic way. They say you must do this, you must not do that, and obviously with Yogananda's path, we're heavily into meditation. And someone said to me, "Oh no, this yuga is not the time for meditation." Krishna explains that Kali Yuga is about devotion. You should only be chanting and performing all these rituals that are as a method of devotion. Meditation is a waste of time. And I said, well, firstly, why are you assuming we're in Kali Yuga? And secondly, you're dismissing a science such as Kriya Yoga. And then we got into this debate, and then you open up this huge can of worms that is this Yugas debate in India and around the world. And then there's the science, the astrophysics side of it as well. So Walter, would you like to provide some input into that debate? Because I'm sure you would have come into that as well.
Yeah. Oh boy, is that a big topic. So it seems like Maya takes little things, simple things, and just twists them around to create these vast misunderstandings. And so one of those is, as we were coming down from the last higher age and sort of consciousness was going a little lower, there were also a lot of things happening that caused the memories to be lost, histories to be lost, and so all these great civilizations from Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon, and Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, the whole Indus Valley, and not to mention the whole Egyptian and everything going on also on the Western continent. So much was lost, and of course, one of the things that was lost was some of this knowledge of astrophysics, or just celestial mechanics, really, and then since all time is based on celestial motions, the day is one spin of the earth, and the year is one orbit around the sun. Obviously, the great year is just one binary orbit, and so when those things are lost, you kind of get mixed up about what time is and how to keep track of time and that sort of thing. And so yeah, it's interesting, but I thought that Sri Yukteswar's explanation in that first part of Holy Science is as clear as you can possibly be as to how it was lost. We were coming down into sort of the lowest part of the beginning of the Kali around 700 BC or so, and rather than restart calendars and you've lost so much information, they just kept the count going. And so, which syncs really well, of course, with the, some other calendars around the world, the Hindu calendar, some of the Hebrew works on time. And so, they just kept it going versus had they been aware of, what's going on in the sky, they could have just restarted it like you normally would. And so that is one thing that is really, I think, keeps us in delusion here. The astrophysics point is, I think, even more interesting and fascinating because the motion of the heavens turning around, every 24,000 years or so is there for everybody to see. But of course, Copernicus said it's due to the Earth wobbling. Mm-hmm. And so we look at it, we see it, and we say, oh, the sun doesn't really move through those constellations. It's just that we're wobbling. And Copernicus was almost forced to come up with that. We're just barely coming out of the Dark Ages, the Renaissance, rebirth of the great year. And he's trying to figure things out. And he's, people always, in the darkest age, they thought, oh, well, you see the sun rise in the east and set in the west, so it must be going around us. And he said, no. That's just, we're spinning on our axis. And that's why you see the sun and everything, rise in the east and set in the west. So he explained that clearly. He got the first Copernican motion of rotation down, the second motion of revolution, the Earth going around the sun. But he was perplexed on the third one, which he called libration, or precession. And so he said the Earth must wobble because he couldn't have the sun finally stable in the center of the solar system and also have the sun moving. That was too big a concept for the time. And so that idea stuck. And of course, Newton came along and said, well, if the sun is, or if the Earth is wobbling, that causes us to see the sun move through different constellations, then it must be due to gravity, which I've just outlined in my Principia. And they said it's probably the force of the moon and the sun, lunisolar theory. But that theory has never worked. They just kind of tweak it every 10 or 20 years to make it match observation. They've now added more than 2,000 inputs. And it's just ridiculous why nobody's sort of getting back to first principles. But I do understand, that it's nobody's job to question the underlying theories. Their job is just to, employ the equations and see how it comes out. And it's information that people, since nobody believes in the Yugas, nobody even bothers to track precession and that sort of thing, except for very technical purposes. So everyone's gone on to something more interesting, finding Planet 9 or plasma physics or whatever it might be. But yeah, those two things, the losing sight of the celestial motion, which makes you lose sight of long scale time, are really wonderful tools for Maya to just keep us all in the dark for a little bit longer. So is the play.
Nice.
Walter, sorry, Mike, go ahead.
So you said that the one great year is like one binary revolution, and of course, then I have the question: if there is a binary star, do you know which one it is? I mean, I think we all have a guess, but I don't know what your opinion is on this. And do you think this binary star is going through that same Yuga cycle that we're going through at the same time as we are?
So it's, on the first part, there's several different candidates for it. I think first you just need to be realistic about what we're seeing and realize, oh, it's probably caused by the whole solar system curving through space, which is a misdiagnosis of, the precession observable, thinking that it's all just caused by the Earth wobbling. But then of course, the question is, okay, what is causing us to curve through space? And it is nice to know that many modern astrophysicists are finally looking for some big object out there. They started looking, less than 10 years ago when they began to find all these TNOs, these trans-Neptunian objects. Pluto is one, Sedna is one, Biden 2012 is one, etc. And these are all sort of Pluto-sized objects that have this strange arrangement in the sky that just screams there's something big happening here, some huge gravitational pull. So at least they're looking, but they're not looking for a star yet. I think they will very soon because they're exhausting the possibilities. And yeah, I've talked with a few open-minded astronomers, astrophysicists about possible candidates, and there's some really excellent ideas about visible stars that we can see, that have strange motions, and of course a lot of the big motion is just hidden as the precession observable. And then of course there's a few theories about, could be some like a black hole or something like that, and that's been put forth in a couple of papers. Although when I was up at Stanford talking to a couple of guys up there, about the Gravity Probe B project, they said, wow, a black hole in our neighborhood, wouldn't that be cool? And then the other guy says, no, it really wouldn't be very cool. So I lean towards the visible side, but I'll wait till the science is done before I say more.
Walter, what are you understand you're actively undertaking or funding some research in this area of looking for the binary star? Is that right?
Yeah, but it's just on a really small scale. We have the Binary Research Institute. We've had 10 different conferences over the years where we bring together different scientists. And some are looking strictly at the astronomy side. And then some are trying to piece together this whole thing, how this change in the electromagnetic field might affect consciousness. And there's some great theories out there over long periods of time. Yeah,
that's something I'd like to touch upon actually, because I'd like to link that. So let's imagine we, at some point in the future, discover the said binary star. We observe it through various means, or it could be a red dwarf, or it could be anything. Say we observe it, and we then confirm this theory Sri Yukteswar propounded in the book. What is the impact of that? Firstly, on our spirituality and consciousness, and secondly, on science and physics as it is understood and taught today.
Just a light question.
with posters such as that you have in your studio that Donna has for YouTube listeners, it's a perfect question, surely.
Can you repeat it one more time?
Yeah, sure. So let us assume that Sri Yukteswar's theory is correct, and we have a binary star, and we're in orbit, as it were, and so what is the impact of that discovery on spirituality and human consciousness in general? That's the first point. And secondly, then, what is the impact on our understanding of science, physical science?
Yeah. So I think for some people, they just won't connect the two, and it'll just be a fascinating discovery. And I was reading, actually talking with some people the other day, and one good theory was regarding Bernard's star, that might be one. It actually comes closer to our solar system than any other star. That's an accepted thing. It's moving faster than any other star you see in the sky. That's accepted. So if most of the motion is hidden in the precession observable, it's a terrific candidate. And it would be right where it's supposed to be, apoapsis and periapsis, sort of the depths of the dark ages and the height of the golden age. So I think some people just say, wow, that's a cool thing, and not tie it so much to the rise and fall of civilization. And so that's why I wrote the book Lost Star, Myth and Time, and did the film, the Great Year documentary, and why working on a fiction film now to just bring this whole idea to a wider audience, so that when the astronomical discovery is confirmed, it can be coupled quickly to the effect that it's having. And I think it could have a very profound effect in awakening consciousness, because, and Donna and I were talking about this yesterday as we were just finishing up, part of the screenplay, that I read a study once on amnesia patients, and when someone loses their memories of the past, they have high anxiety and they really can't plan for the future. Apparently, if you don't know where you've been, it's hard to plan where you're going. So it's sort of logical. So all this angst and anxiety goes with lost memories. And so just imagine if the entire planet had lost the memories of where it came from, and sort of lost a fragment of how you keep time and doesn't even know where it's going. And so we suffer with this huge societal angst about, this is right, no, that's right, we got to do this. And there's a big fight out there about what's right and wrong. And I think if we really understood these cycles of time, as well as we understood the cycle of day, okay, it's dark now, but don't worry, it's going to be light later on. Or the cycle of the year, yes, it's cold now, but spring will come, and then there'll be summer, and we should plan and do things. Same thing with the great year. I think when we realize that it's real, it has a measurable cause, that we can begin at last to breathe a little bit, plan for a truly magnificent future, and work as a team once again, I hope.
And the second part was on our understanding, or the impact on our understanding of the physical sciences of that discovery when it comes.
Yeah, it changes everything, doesn't it? It changes, how you look at anthropology and archaeology and psychology, and it changes a lot of things. Yukteswar again says in the Holy Science that through the Yuga, the world goes through a complete inner and outer change. And so, yeah, I think we're going to look at a lot of things very differently once we have a knowledge of, who we are and where we're going.
And after I read the Holy Science, I mean, it's a small book for your audience that haven't read it. It's a very short book, but a very profound book. And I started to think, well, what's happening in the world around us now that could help confirm that this is real, that this cycle is real? And the word consciousness has become a very fashionable word in recent years. My friend group that didn't talk about consciousness before in the financial industry all of a sudden are. They're talking about consciousness and energy, and people are meditating more. Yoga has become very mainstream and very cool. How does the Yuga cycle apply to the world of industry and investing? We have companies like Tesla that have now become very popular, and companies like Carnegie Steel have slowly died away. The oil companies, the dirtier energy companies are dying away and being replaced with cleaner energy. Companies like Acorns have become profoundly popular, and the older institution of the financial industry is slowly dying away. So we can apply the principles of the Yuga cycle to the world around us right now, and help prove the theory in the real world as well, or in our day-to-day world versus the astronomical world. I think they'll perhaps fit together.
That's a really good point, because so far we haven't mentioned yet, for the listeners, like which yuga we are in now. So according to Sri Yukteswar, we are not in Kali Yuga anymore, but we are in Dwapura Yuga.
We are in 321 Dwapura, according to his new, his current, or his proposed theory of naming our current year.
I look forward to the day, because I just bought the SRF wall calendar for the next year when it will when it will say that year on it. What is the implication? What do you guys think is the implication of us being in Dwapara Yuga? What can we expect for the future? Does it give us any hints? Does this take away some of the angst that people feel about the future?
I hope it does, once we have a greater understanding. But I think that, Donna made a great point, pointing to specific industries and how they're slowly changing from, dirty to clean, just in this short period of history that, our father and grandfathers lived in. And so I think that's a very, very hopeful sign. And you're right. So Sri Yukteswar said that we're in the early Dwapara Yuga. There's roughly a 200-year sandhi, or transition period, between each of the yugas. So, we're only in Yuga proper here for a little over 100 years. I think the actual technical measurement of the time, most of this year is 321, as you say, but because they use the autumnal equinox as the hour hand, where is the sun on the autumnal equinox as it moves through the zodiac? It's a macrocosm of what we have on our watches. And if you use that, you can see we're very near, just barely past the low point in the cycle. And we have roughly, another 10,500 years or so to go to reach the pinnacle of the golden age. But it's, we can't even imagine the changes. Just think of the changes in the last 100 years, and also consider the fact that everything sort of moves faster. It's just unbelievable, I think, how things will be in another 100 years.
John Anthony West on the Great Year documentary. He's a great character. I love John Anthony West personally, but I'm sure it was amazing working with him. He did say something interesting. Many things. One of them was that part of the psychology why we would look at this and think, well, it couldn't be true, is because of the linear progression that we have in our minds. And he attributed that to of growth, of progress, and he attributed that to the theory of evolution and Darwinism. So we must be the pinnacle that the Earth has ever created because of the idea of Darwinism. I mean, what do you think about that? Does that play a role in psychology when we consider the yugas being real or not?
Yeah, so John was a great friend for many years, and God bless his soul, just recently left us. And what a classic character, with his khakis and his suspenders and his pith helmet. Wonderful man. And he had studied Schwaller de Lubitz and Egypt so carefully. He'd been there 30, almost 40 times, I believe, and really started to understand the esoteric part of, Egypt in its higher ages. And it just, completely dawned on him how little we know, how much we've forgotten. And so he would use terms like, quackademics teach us that we're at the pinnacle of evolution right now, no civilization has ever been smarter, and yet we have all these problems in the world. And maybe a better solution is just figuring out how to truly live close to nature and keep as much of nature as you can, and a lot of those other problems won't exist. So we missed that point here in our in this early Dwapura, because we're just still very materially oriented and just getting into our gizmos and gadgets and loving it and think that's the solution. And yet when we look back at, very advanced ancient cultures, we're not finding a lot of old electronics there, They were tuned into something much higher, subtle energies, And I think, when we figure out why they built so many megalithic sites around the world, cairns, dolmens, henges, et cetera, and so many of them aligned with key, solar events or celestial alignments, stellar alignments, that we'll begin to understand, what the ancients were into in a higher age.
I'm curious, whenever you speak to people, probably not to our audience, I would assume that it is a way of, well, where's the evidence for maybe higher ages existing? Is that just a blocker for us to think, well, they also must have had similar type of technology as to what we have? Is it exactly the same type of thinking?
Yeah, I think so. You tend to wear the mindset of your life and times. And so whatever we think of advanced now, that, if they don't have that stuff, then wow, they couldn't have been as advanced as we are. And yet, if you look carefully, that we're always making little discoveries that are, super cool. I read about one that in some South American ruins of very ancient civilizations that, they had these canals and aqueducts around quite on an extensive scale. And they noticed at the bottom of these that there was like a little diamond stone, every 22 feet or something, some number, I can't remember what it was. And no archaeologist could figure out what this was, what it was for, until somebody with a little bit of a physics background finally figured out that the rate at which water flows there, that if you put these tiny little stones, every X number of feet, it would create just a little bit of turbulence in the flow and keep the canal free from sediment. And so you didn't have to clean the canals or anything like that. And so it was, I think, it was just a very clever, intelligent way to see things. Our brute force approach to technology nowadays, I personally don't think is the solution. Another thing along those lines, I always hear from people that, oh, well, if they were so smart, then why didn't they have writing, until roughly 2500 BC or so? And, there's a lot of mythological stories about a pre-Babel age, before the tongues became confused. And then, of course, both Sri Yukteswar and Yogananda and others tell us that, the Treta Yuga is an age of telepathy, when you really don't need things written down in the normal manner. And also, if you understand stone, we use stone nowadays to silicon to hold memories, right? Silicon chips. And, what if they knew a way to do this naturally and to tune into it? So I think it's all there. I think there's tremendous information that we don't see because we don't even have a concept of the level of technology that the ancients were at.
Yeah, I think that we made an important point amidst all that is what metric do you use to assess how advanced a civilization is? If it is just, how many transistors can you get on a chip? That's a pretty poor metric, isn't it? Because how does that relate to how happy I am, how close I am to God? But if it is science such as, how earthed are you? How grounded are you? How developed is your consciousness? These are things that we don't even really know how to measure, do we? So how can we assess how advanced we are, because we don't even know how to assess those things. Only certain pockets and branches of people in the know, such as Yogananda and Sri Yukteswar, would be able to tell us that, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, it's a whole different value system. Right now, we value money very, very highly because we think that's the road to happiness. And of course, the greatest philosophers on the planet tell us, no, that's just an intermediary thing that might get you some temporary happiness, but happiness is really something much deeper, much greater, of course.
Maybe as we progress further in Dwapura Yuga, we'll start to be able to measure people's consciousness, and those people with the highest levels of consciousness will become the rulers and leaders of the world. I think we're far away from
in higher ages, we did have that, the enlightened rulers like a Krishna. And and then of course, something was lost along the way as we slipped into lower ages.
That's where I kind of
quite as enlightened.
Yeah, and you look at the kings and queens, and they have the crown, and that's to symbolize the sun, and the sun is to symbolize enlightenment or something. And I kind of thought to myself, well, yeah, in days gone by, maybe they truly were the most enlightened ones, and it wasn't just brute force or power. Makes sense in some ways.
Yeah, and again, Yukteswar tells us that there are certain metals and certain jewels that can help, act almost like a lightning rod. They ward off the bad stuff and track the good subtle energies. And your rulers of old, they'd not only wear these crowns with these jewels, but they'd have particular chairs, thrones faced in a certain direction, usually east. And they'd often be on, geophysical discontinuities that, I think ley line's a popular term for it, but they're very tuned into subtle energies that we're just barely learning about today. So I think there was a higher technology operating there.
How much of other cultures, other times, have you really studied, in relation to this yuga, concept of the yuga? With the Bible, you mentioned maybe the Mayans. Is this a cohesive story across, the entire planet that's over time told in just different ways?
I think it is pretty cohesive, yes. Of course, there's environmental influences in any family, tribe, community, geographic location that will cause certain people to be farther behind or more focused on different types of development. But I remember, when I was a kid, I've been reading about this stuff for 65 years or so. And my mom would give me all these books on ancient civilizations. I was just fascinated with it, as a little boy. And so I knew a lot about history from these books by the time I got to school. And the history teacher said, Columbus came here in his 3 ships in 1492 and discovered America. And I had read some stuff. No, I think that, Vikings were here before. There's probably pretty good evidence that some other people were here before, some Asian cultures, et cetera. And so I said, why is it only 500 years ago that we landed in the Americas? And he said, oh, well, the ships just weren't big enough and strong enough. And so I kind of accepted that for a little while. And then I was reading a National Geographic magazine where they had dug up some ships that were buried in the Giza Plateau. And this was just a few years later. And one of these ships was twice the length of Columbus's ship. It had been built so carefully that here it is. It was buried 4,600 years ago, before the Great Pyramid was there, supposedly. I think it was there, but and so, that's 9 times as old as Columbus. They had ships twice the size of Columbus. So I don't know why we have these wrong notions about history, but it tends to be very myopic, and we lose sight of what's really going on, in my opinion.
That's the sun boat, isn't it? The solar boat or something.
Yeah, the solar boat of Khufu is the largest one. Right? Yeah, and then of course some people look at that and say, oh yeah, but the railings are too low to protect the ship from the waves or something. They couldn't possibly make it across the ocean. Okay, they could build the pyramid, but they couldn't figure out how to put a larger railing on the boat. It's just ridiculous, some of these arguments.
So I think it really comes down to the victor's right history. Is that the saying, or the victor's right history? Pretty much.
It's true, right? Yeah, and of course, we went through the Dark Ages, so, and all these things lag, especially institutions, religious institutions, banking institutions, etc. So the mainstream stuff is all about 100 years old that we're being fed now for the most part.
That's why podcasts. Sorry, please, Chris.
No, go. That's why
Podcasts like yours and books like Walter's and books like The Holy Science and the movie Lost Stars is so important to get this truth of time into people's consciousness, because when you learn about it, study it, and try to understand it, and then come to understand it, it's like we knew about it all along. It becomes one of the most obvious things. It makes so much sense. It's like we always knew.
Mm-hmm. I completely share with that thought. And when I first read The Holy Science, it just, like you said, Walter, early on, it kind of clicked. It made sense as well to me. I read it and had to reread it, to be fair, many times, because it's quite, you read one sentence and you think, hold on, you need to meditate on that for a while. Then you go back to reading it again. But really, for me, it raises questions as to the spiritual elements and what that means for us in our practice, in our daily practice. Yogananda taught meditation, self-realization, now in this lifetime, don't wait. And whenever I really looked at the yugas and what it meant was, well, there's cycles of consciousness. And I think the words that were described was, it's like electrical cycles. And it kind of was curious to me. So how does that apply to myself? Does that mean that I simply can't attain some kind of Satya Yuga level of consciousness? So what's your understanding of this, Walter?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I hear that a lot. Well, why don't I just wait for higher Yuga, get in, incarnated a few thousand years. Right, but why wait and suffer for a longer period of time? Or go through ignorance for such a long period of time. When we've had these enlightened masters bring this advanced technology to us, a dispensation for the atomic age, Kriya and the other techniques. And I compare it to the other cycles whenever I think about the Yuga and what you do in it relative. So during the day, we don't say, well, it's nighttime, I'm not going to use any form of technology. I'm just going to wander around in the dark or be cold or whatever, and that's not what we do. No, we've built shelters, we've come up with lights, we have lots of ways to counter the effects of darkness at night. And same thing with winter during the year. We have ways to counter effects, winter effects, and ways to store food and all this sort of thing. So we use technology, advanced ways of doing things to get through the darkest parts of the daily cycle, the diurnal, and the seasonal cycle. So should we too in the Yuga cycle. Just because we're in the lower ages don't mean, okay, we got to bump around and war with each other, that sort of thing. We should be employing these techniques and really have a golden age consciousness now. And that's the beautiful message of the great ones, in my opinion.
Yeah, what you said about why suffer longer than you need to resonates well with me as well, because there's some of the quotes he says, know it now or in 1,000 incarnations, and then there's so it's up to you, or you can, and then there's a chant in the valley of sorrows 1,000 years or till tomorrow. And if you really go in deep into the meaning of those words that you're singing, there's now is the time, isn't it? You don't worry. There's something that's infinitely better and purer if you're willing to make the effort now.
And Priyank, Sri Yukteswar, he chose to end his book with a quote on love. Well, it was actually a stanza from the Scottish poet Sir Walter Scott, and he could have chosen anyone to quote, and he quoted this: "Love rules the court, the camp, the grove, the men below and the saints above. For love is heaven, and heaven is love." Profound.
Goosebumps.
Memorized, Donna. Perhaps he wrote that just for you, Donna.
for all of us, for humanity.
Yeah,
it is beautiful though. We go through all these technical discussions and try to figure out all the science behind it, and it all comes down to love. What a story.
I feel like when we figure out that everything goes in cycles, then the thought also comes, I must have done this 1,000,000 times already. And the cycles are really, there's like the yugas, and then once you know about the yugas, you think, oh, okay, but this doesn't apply to me. I can like do things that are not meant for this yuga, but you can only do it inside of yourself. Like if you want to try to bring technology or something that doesn't belong here, then it won't work. There's somehow those cosmic laws that try to prevent this, the same way that the civilizations are going down in the descending age, kind of, it seems. And I feel like this is kind of the way that Maya or life is telling you that at some point you need to get out of this, because this is going to repeat itself on an endless loop. And unless you are ready and you create your own Satya Yuga forever inside yourself.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's another poet, I can't remember, it might be Voltaire, or Victor Hugo maybe. There's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come, Yeah. So yeah, if you have the right idea at the right point in the cycle, it's kind of easy to manifest, versus if your ideas are too old, the world doesn't seem to be interested, or if they're too far ahead of what everyone's willing to accept, then you'll work in obscurity. I like to, when I'm investing, I like to think of, what is the world ready for right now? Look for that parade and then jump to the front of it with a baton, That's where you want to be.
Wow. There's a question asked by Mike, it's maybe a fun one. Just before we started recording was, do you think that we'll find the binary star system and come to the realization that maybe yugas might be, the idea to follow, etc. But in our lifetimes, how soon do you think we are in this Dwapura Yuga stage?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think astronomy is at a very interesting place right now. Ever since Jeff Marcy and his team just 15 years ago started to realize that there's a lot of stars out there that have planets around them. That was a huge breakthrough. And then this recent realization by Mike Brown and Badajan at Caltech that, man, there's got to be something big yanking on our solar system. So we're really going in that direction at a pretty rapid pace right now. I think it's it's going to be pretty soon that people recognize that the precession observable has been misdiagnosed.
like a geeky question. Like, I'm not sure if you heard of this, but NASA is launching this James Webb Space Telescope. Do you think this will have any impact on discoveries?
Yeah, is that the one that's
infrared? Yeah, it's looking for the infrared spectrum, but in a much higher resolution than the Hubble.
Right, so they can see much smaller potential planets. Earth-like planets is the hope there, and I think that's terrific. You know, but we have no idea how we'll get to them yet, and maybe we're not even supposed to get to other planets until consciousness is a bit higher. But it's a great time to start mapping it all out, because Elon Musk is moving at a very fast pace.
In relation to that, when you said it's not our time, but you know, as I think this is in your documentary, that you know, we observe other solar systems out there, and a lot of them have these twin binary star systems, or 50% of them do. So that begs the question: if there is life out there, which obviously there probably is, they might be operating in their own. They would be operating in their own Yuga system, and some of them would be in the highest stage, some of them that we're looking at in our sky today, and they would be able to do this interplanetary travel and into solar system travel, into galaxy travel.
Without a doubt, I'm sure many of them do and are, and you know, probably, I don't know, maybe somebody on this call. But, you know, what do we really know of other dimensions and how you travel faster than the speed of light? I think imagine all the discoveries we're going to make in the next 100 years, and that's probably one of them. You know, I think our consciousness is being softened up now that, you know, UFOs, when I was a kid, were thought to be, you know, crazy science. No rational scientist would be interested in something like that. And of course, today we see very rational scientists are quite interested in that, including, you know, governments and military and things like this. So it's already changed. And
the message of love has to come with that message of other life out there, though. Has to. Really.
Sure.
For sure. So what are you working on at the moment, Walter? I think Donna, or Walter, no, you mentioned it was a fiction. Is it a movie or a documentary, or what is it you guys are working on specifically?
Yes, I'd, you know, just want to get this message out. And so that was the reason for writing a nonfiction book, Lost Star, Myth and Time, to talk about many of these topics. And then making the documentary film, nonfiction again, The Great Year, narrated by James Earl Jones. But I just thought a fun way to reach a larger audience would be through fiction, you know, because the great ones come and tell us, hey, you are a god, you are a superhero, you can do anything. And most of us don't believe it. And so Hollywood comes out with all these, you know, Marvel movies to tell us we have superpowers, and it's slowly seeping into the consciousness. And so it's a wonderful mechanism to get people to consider a topic that they're told, or you know, that they're not open to in normal consciousness. And so, yeah, this film is a beautiful sort of fictional story, really heartwarming story about this lone astronomer who's looking at sort of lunar positions relative to the background stars, when he discovers that the Earth whole solar system is curving radically through space, you know, and this has a big impact on him, but he's a nobody. And then he meets this sort of rebel archaeologist, and she's come across evidence that ancient civilizations appear to be more advanced than we ever thought they were, but she doesn't have any explanation as to why this could be. And so, needless to say, the two end up falling in love and working together, and this whole idea comes out. And Yeah, we've really had fun working on it. Donna's been helping, and then of course Yumiko, and you know, we really have this nice woman's perspective in there also, which I'm no good at writing about. And so, Donna, you please talk a little bit more about it from your perspective.
It's a beautiful film. It's a beautiful story. Our astronomer, he's looking up towards the stars, and our archaeologist, she's looking down, of course. And then when they come together, they find the path. They find the path forward. And what we've really tried to work hard on in the script is how do we have our audience understand that they're part of this? Because when you look so far back in time, or you look so far ahead in the future, you can almost disassociate yourself from the Yuga cycle. But if we look at now and what it means for us now and the world around us, then it might be more helpful to feel that we're actually part of it. So that has been weaved through the story with a bit of a Wall Street element as well. Yeah. Because we're seeing now that Wall Street is moving into higher ages with a lot more focus and attention on socially responsible investing. And that will be the driver going into the future. And that is very much tied to the Yuga cycle. Yeah, so there's a really good scoundrel in the B story, the Wall Street story. And then there's a really good antagonist too, that's another astronomer that's sort of fighting some of these things and about to make a different announcement. And so, yeah, it's a really fast-paced, exciting story, yet quite heartwarming with all these elements of the Yugas and love in there.
I can't wait to see it. Do you know when it will come out? Is there a date yet?
No, you know, these things really take a bit of time. But we're just putting our heart and souls into finishing the story up, and then we're beginning our conversations with various potential co-producers along with us.
Well, if you need 3 like-minded, spiritually inclined, independent reviewers before it goes released, you've got 3 volunteers ready and eager in us.
Good, I appreciate that. Yeah, but can you tell me about your day jobs, just so I have a better understanding of what you're doing when you're not doing this fascinating work? I'm
an electronic engineer. I work for London Underground, but I studied astrophysics at university, so this subject is very close to my heart.
Oh, fantastic! Okay.
I'm a software engineer. My father was also, or is also, a devotee, and he was very much into the Yugas, and so I kind of got that from him a lot.
And I'm in recruitment, or head of people, and I do that for a small tech startup they're based in Bristol, but I do that remotely. But my background, I've got the environmental management and economics background, so sustainability is something I'm very interested in.
Good. So it sounds like we're all pushing the planet forward in our own way there then.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, just let us know where it's going to be, when it's going to be live. We'll be keen to have a look. For anybody who hasn't seen the Great Year, where would you suggest anybody maybe access that documentary?
Yeah, it's just free online. The Great Year. It's YouTube. Narrated by James Earl Jones. YouTube. So if you Google that, is that the best way, Donna, to find it? Yeah, YouTube.
Great work. YouTube. 500,000 views, so not too badly to date. It's pretty epic.
Yeah. Actually, we had to take it down once because somebody actually stole it and put it on their site. So that's the second time. I would think we're around 500,000 the first time too. So
are you going through a cycle of your own?
It's our own little Yuga cycle.
And the Binary Research Institute as well. We didn't go into detail about that, but there's amazing work. We could spend another hour talking about that, but we'll not go into into too much detail. Is there anything coming up there? Do you have another conference? Are you doing anything in particular?
So we kind of put them on hold, of course, because of the COVID thing. But yeah, I'd love to do another conference, probably, next year, hopefully. And again, it's so interesting to bring together, anthropologists and archaeologists and astronomers and geophysicists, et cetera, and really talk about this whole subject. And you just start to see how the pieces fit together. So yeah, we hope to have another conference on precession and ancient knowledge, probably late 22 is my guess.
Epic. Well, I think with that, really, it's we've really enjoyed the time today to talk with you both. Thank you so much for being on the show. We'd love to have you back again, maybe when the movie goes live. We could have you back on for a quick session. If we're going to be covering the full 89 minutes, I think, on the Awake Minute by Minute podcast. So we'll be doing this for a while to come.
I love it. That's such a cool project.
So thank you so much for being on the show. And guys, unless there's anything else, any burning questions, Michael, or
yeah, I've got a burning question. You got some epic looking posters there, Chris and Donna. talk our YouTube watchers through those, because they look pretty cool.
Well, this is the book cover for Lost Arab Myth and Time on the far side there. This is a poster that I designed for the 24,000 year cycle of the ages.
And you're pushing aside a bonsai tree.
That is a bonsai tree. Yeah.
Rather big one as well. I mean, is it quite old?
And it's covering the Yugas, so we can't tell exactly how it is.
And you'll never know.
Yeah.
We have a Kepler poster, a time travel poster, and a Superman poster.
And what are all that? Is that all the little extracts of text and stuff in the wallpaper? Or is that, no, there's bricks. No,
That's
I'm reading
bricks.
too much into it.
Oh, I like
Good
that.
idea. Good idea. Next time we'll have that.
You heard it here.
Yeah, lovely.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much, everyone. It's
Thank
been a
you.
pleasure.
Take care.
Enjoy. Jai Guru.
All righty. Take care.